We're going to look at a very familiar Bible story. It's going to be Jacob and Esau. So if you have a Bible, let me encourage you to open to Genesis because we're going to be in Genesis. I will have the scriptures up behind me as well. But we're going to be talking a little bit about Jacob and Esau today. Jacob and Esau. It's a famous story, or a familiar story, I should say. And we're going to try to come at it from a little bit of a different angle as we talk about these twin boys who were born to Isaac and Rebekah. Now, I'm going to kind of give a little bit of a real fast overview here, just so you understand what we're trying to do. While both of these boys were still in their mother's womb, the Lord came to the mom, Rebekah, and said, "You have two nations inside of your womb, and the older is going to serve the younger." And these two boys of Esau, he grows up to be this rugged hunter. He was loved by his father. And Jacob was one who stayed around the home, and he was probably a farmer, stayed close to home, and he was very much loved by his mother. And we're going to skip in their story all the way until their father is nearing his death, almost 40 years. So Isaac thinks he's going to die. And he's the dad, and he brings in Esau, who's the oldest, and he says, "I want you to make a final meal for me to eat. And that way I can eat it and then give you the family blessing since you're the oldest." While Esau went out to go kill a meal, the mom, Rebekah, brought in the younger son, Jacob, and she prepared a meal, handed it to him, and said, "Go in and tell your dad that you are your brother so that you can get the blessing." And Jacob knew this is never going to fool dad because we're so different. For one, Esau, the Bible describes him as a hairy man. Like, I just think that's so funny. Like, why would the Bible, that's who you are. This guy's hairy. He was a hairy man, and Jacob is described as a smooth man. Yeah, like it's just insane. But so Jacob knows, man, I can't go in and fool dad. His eyesight might be bad, but he's not that bad. And so that's where we're going to pick up the story in Genesis chapter number 27. Genesis chapter 27. And we're going to read a couple verses here. Genesis 27, verse number 15. Genesis 27 and verse 15 is where we're going to start. Here's what we read. And I'm going to read from the New Living Translation today, just because I think the words are going to be a lot easier for the kids. So it says this: "Then she took Esau's favorite clothes, which were there in the house, and gave them to her younger son Jacob. She covered his arms and the smooth part of his neck with the skin of the young goats. Then she gave Jacob the delicious meal, including freshly baked bread." So mom disguises Jacob with Esau's clothes and goat hair. Like, could you imagine if somebody reached out to you and they rubbed goat hair and they're like, "Oh, that's Esau." You're like, that's, again, hairy man. And then she sent him into his father. Look at verse 18. It says, "So Jacob took the food to his father. 'My father,' he said. 'Yes, my son,' Isaac answered. 'Who are you, Esau or Jacob?' And Jacob replied, 'It's Esau, your firstborn son. I've done as you told me. Here is the wild game. Now sit up and eat it so you can give me your blessing.' And look at verse 21. It seems like Isaac wasn't convinced. Then Isaac said to Jacob, 'Come closer so I can touch you and make sure that you really are Esau.' So Jacob went closer to his father, and Isaac touched him. 'The voice is Jacob, but the hands are Esau,' Isaac said, almost as if he's confused. Verse 23, it says, 'But he did not recognize Jacob because Jacob's hands felt hairy, just like Esau's.' So Isaac prepared to bless Jacob." And notice this question: "But are you really my son Esau?" he asked. "Yes, I am," Jacob replied. So we can see that dad is not certain that this is the right son that he's going to bless. And so he's asking him questions, he's touching him, and he's, "Are you really Esau?" And finally, Jacob says, "I am." And Isaac says, "Okay." Verse 25. Then Isaac said, now my son, bring me the wild game. Let me eat it, and then I will give you my blessing. So Jacob took the food to his father, and Isaac ate it. He also drank the wine that Jacob served him. Verse 26, then Isaac said to Jacob, please come a little closer and kiss me, my son. So Jacob went over and kissed him. And when Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he was finally convinced, and he blessed his son. I think I'm a little bit behind on here. Sorry. Is this not moving? There we go. That Jacob served him and blessed his son. There we go. I'm sorry. I didn't realize it wasn't going with me. Okay. So we get the story here, right? Jacob knows that he is connived against his dad. Isaac has blessed him, but he's got to get out of there because Esau is coming. Look at verse number 30. It says this, as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and almost before Jacob had left his father, Esau returned from his hunt. Esau prepared a delicious meal and brought it to his father. Then he said, sit up, my father, and eat my wild game so you can give me your blessing. And so as soon as Esau arrives, he's like, Dad, here's what you asked me to do. Now it's time for you to bless me. And Isaac, the Bible says, trembles. Let's read that, verse 32. But Isaac asked him, who are you? Esau replied, it's your son, your firstborn son Esau. Isaac began to tremble uncontrollably and said, well then who just served me wild game? I have already eaten it, and I blessed him just before you came. And yes, that blessing must stand. So here's what's going on, right? Isaac gives the blessing to the wrong son. He wants to give it to Esau, but he gives it to Jacob. Jacob takes the blessing. He leaves. Esau comes in, and Isaac realizes he's been deceived. Oh no. And Isaac says, I can't take that blessing back. Makes Esau really upset, and Jacob runs away. And I think this probably is familiar to most of you, a Bible story, but like think about what just happened. In order for Jacob to receive his father's blessing, these are the things that had to happen. He had to dress up like his brother. He had to use his brother's name, and he had to hide his true identity. He runs away for 20 years, and then finally God says, hey, Jacob, it's time to go back. And Jacob was going to go back, but now he's thinking, oh, but the last time I was home, my brother wanted to kill me. I can't go home. But God said it's time to go home. And so on his way back, Jacob, two things happen in his life. The first is he sends some servants ahead to tell Esau, hey, Jacob's coming home. He wants to know how he's going to react. Those messengers return, and here's the news they have. Esau's coming for you with 400 of his men. Jacob's terrified. What is he going to do? He tries to go to sleep that night, and he cannot sleep. And something miraculous happens on the night before he meets his brother. And we're going to read a little bit of it in Genesis chapter 32. So flip a few pages over and find Genesis chapter 32. And we're going to begin in verse number 24. Genesis 32 and verse number 24. Here's what we read. It says, this left Jacob all alone in the camp, and a man came and wrestled with him until the dawn began to break. I know the Bible says a man, and most biblical scholars will tell you because of the way the whole interaction goes and the way that Jacob speaks about seeing the face of God, this was not just a man, this was Jesus. The angel of the Lord is what many people believe. In verse 25, here's what happens. It says, when the man saw that he would not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of socket. Then the man said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Now, let's just think about where we were before. Jacob got his father's blessing 20 years earlier. And his dad said, well, who are you? And he said, well, I'm Esau. Now, 20 years later, Jacob comes for another blessing, and he's about to be asked the same question. Look at verse 27. Verse 27 says, "What is your name?" The man asked. He replied, "Jacob." 20 years later, Jacob is finally being honest with himself and with God. And because of that, he receives a blessing. Verse 28 says, "Your name will no longer be called Jacob," the man told him. "From now on, you will be called Israel, because you have fought with God and with men and have won." Jacob, his name means deceiver. Israel, his name means prince with God. But the blessing came with a cost, right? Because God touched Jacob's hip. From that moment on, Jacob would walk with a limp for the rest of his life. It was a daily reminder that he had met God face to face. And so let's pause before we continue on with these guys' story. So we know how Jacob got his father's blessing, but how did Jacob get God's blessing? Well, he had to walk alone. He had to wrestle with the truth. And you say, what do you mean by that? Who is Jesus? The way, the truth, and the life? And that's the one Jacob wrestled with. Jacob had to confess who he was. I am Jacob. And from that point on, he would walk differently. But Jacob's story and Esau's story doesn't end with a name change, because remember, Esau was on his way to meet Jacob the next day. And so the next day, bless you, Jacob approached his brother as the two came to meet for the first time since Jacob wore his brother's clothes and used his brother's name to steal his brother's blessing. How is Esau going to respond? Let's look at Genesis 33. Genesis 33, verse number 3. Genesis 33, verse number 3 says this. Then Jacob went on ahead. As he approached his brother, he bowed to the ground 7 times before him. Then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they both wept. I mean, think about what just happened. They hadn't met, seen each other in 20 years. Jacob bows to the ground as a sign of humility and fear. And Esau goes and he picks him up off the ground and he hugs him and he kisses him and he embraces him. And in that moment, it's so clear. Esau's forgiven him. He's not seeking revenge. He's seeking relationship. And then Esau asks Jacob in verse number 8, "Hey, what were all the flocks and herds?" Because Jacob had sent a bunch of gifts towards Esau. "What were all the flocks and herds I met as I came?" Esau asked. And Jacob replied, "Well, they're a gift, my lord, to ensure your friendship." Esau says, "My brother, I have plenty," Esau answered. "Keep what you have for yourself." Right? So think with all this is going on. Jacob bows, Esau picks him up. He looks, he's like, "Why did you send all this stuff?" He's like, "I was trying to buy your friendship." He's like, "You don't have to buy my friendship. Take your stuff back. I have enough." And then Esau says, "In fact, I want you to come live with me. Come back and let's live in the same land." Verse number 12. "Well," Esau said, "let's be going. I will lead the way." But Jacob hesitates, and in verse 14, this is what Jacob says: "Please, my lord, go ahead of your servant. We will follow slowly at a pace that is comfortable for the livestock and the children, and I will meet you at Seir," which is where Esau lives. So Jacob says, "Hey, you go on ahead. We'll come. We have a lot of children and flocks, and you have 400 men. You guys can all go back. We'll meet you there." And Esau says, "Okay." And this last statement, he says, "All right, but at least let me assign some of my men to guide and protect you." And Jacob responded, "That's not necessary. It's enough that you have received me warmly, my lord." So think what Jacob just got offered: a group of people of Esau's. Here's some of my servants. They'll stay with you and they'll protect you. And Jacob's like, no, I'll be fine. So Esau goes home, fully expecting Jacob to come behind him. Now, their story is going to continue, but let's just pause one more time. When these two brothers, one having lied and deceived and stolen what was most valuable to his other brother, his father's blessing, how did that reunion go? Well, when he was finally reunited with Esau, Jacob bowed and he called Esau his Lord. He was joyfully embraced by his brother. He was forgiven by his brother. He discovered that his brother had plenty and had no need for his gifts. He was offered a place to live with his brother, a home with him. And he said, I'm going to give you some of my people and they're going to walk with you on the journey. Now, when we read this story, probably to our kids, and we try to pull a lesson out of them and share, a lot of times what we're going to say is, well, hey, as we look at the story of Jacob and Esau, now let's be honest and let's not try to deceive and let's be kind to one another and the way they treat each other. And those are really, really good lessons and we should teach those. But there is something far deeper going on when two brothers have this reunion, because it points us to a reunion that we will one day have with our older brother. You see, if we read this story with a spiritual lens, looking for Jesus, we're going to find the story of Jacob and Esau. It is a preview of the gospel. It's really, really good news, right? Think back about how did Jacob get his father's blessing? He had to dress up like Esau. He had to use Esau's name and he had to hide who he really was. Now look at what the gospel reminds us of. For us to receive the blessing of our Heavenly Father, what do? Well, we come dressed in the righteous robes of Jesus. But guess what? We don't have to steal them. He gives them to us. And we come in the name of our older brother. And it's the name by which all can be saved, but it's the only name by which any can be saved. And we come to the Father and we ask for our brother's blessing, but we're not deceiving the Father. He knows exactly who we are when he chooses to give us our brother's blessing. That's just really good news. If we come in the robes and in the name of our older brother, we get our older brother's blessing without ever deceiving our Father. But there's only one way we get the name and we get the robes of our brother. We must come alone. Nobody can come on our behalf. You can't come under the faith of your mom or your grandfather. You can't send somebody else on your behalf. You have to come. And you're going to have to wrestle with the truth, right? We have to wrestle with the fact that Jesus is the only way to the Father. No one comes to the Father except through him. We have to confess our own identity, right? We can't say, I'm good enough. We have to say, I am not worthy. And what's going to happen is if we have that face-to-face encounter with God, then we are going to walk differently, which is, if you were with us last week, we talked about the walk of a disciple. If we're going to be a disciple of Jesus, we must take up our cross. We must deny ourselves. We must follow or imitate him. And here's the cool thing. One day, for all of us, there will be a moment where we see our brother and we are reunited with him genuinely, face to face. And guess what's going to happen? From the brother who we used his robes and we used his name to steal his blessing, guess what is going to happen at that reunion? When we finally meet him, we are going to bow before him as Lord. We will be embraced by him. We will be forgiven by him. We will bring nothing to offer him. We will receive a home and be surrounded by his people forever. Now you tell me, is Jacob and Esau just a little kid's story about how to be honest with one another? Or is this more of a shadow of what's to come? The really, really good news that we all have to look forward to, that should overwhelm us with the goodness of Jesus, because Jacob's story becomes a mirror for our own, reminding us that God's blessings don't flow to the people who pretend that everything's okay or hide their sin or perform their way to him. No, it comes to those who are finally honest with who they are and with what they have done. And they say, you, Jesus, are my only hope. Because his blessing is never earned. It's always a reward. It's never a reward for good behavior. It's always a gift of grace, something that we do not deserve, but that he loves to give. Okay. But what's really neat is that the story of Jacob and Esau, which takes place all the way in Genesis, it actually gets picked up again after Jesus dies by this man named Paul, who writes about Jacob and Esau. And if you're willing to join me there, he writes about it in the book of Romans. So if you have a Bible, we're going to look at Romans briefly, because it's one of the most important chapters in all of the Bible. Romans chapter number 9. And Paul is going to use Jacob and Esau and their story to teach an amazingly important truth for us all. Romans chapter 9, I'm just going to pick it up, verse number 11. And Paul's going to be talking about Jacob and Esau. And again, I'm reading from the New Living Translation. So here's what it says. It says, yet before the twins were born or had done anything good or bad, in order that God's purpose in election might stand, not by works, but by him who calls, she was told the older will serve the younger. Just as it is written, notice these words, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. Verse 14, what then shall we say? Is God unjust? Not at all. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. It does not therefore depend on human desire or effort, but on God's mercy. Now, I'm going to go back to those first few verses we read, where Paul points out something staggering. He says, before the twins ever took their first breath, meaning before they could do something good or bad, God made a decision. The younger one, Jacob, would carry the covenant promise that had been given to Abraham and to Isaac. And he didn't choose him because Jacob was more lovable, because the boys hadn't even been born yet. They hadn't done anything right. God just chose Jacob because God decided to write his story that way. And God can do whatever he wants. He can have mercy on who he wants to have mercy. He can have compassion on who he has compassion. And some will look at these verses and say, well, God selects, he elects who gets saved and who does not get saved. But that's not at all what this is teaching. This wasn't about Jacob being saved and Esau not being saved. This was about Jacob carrying on a covenant promise and Esau not carrying on that covenant promise. It says, Jacob I love, but Esau I hated. And here's what we sometimes think, that, well, God chose Jacob. He elected him to be saved. And God did not choose Esau. He elected him not to be saved. But it has nothing to do with salvation. It has everything to do with mission. God chose Jacob to carry on a line, and he didn't choose Esau to carry on that line. And now somebody can look and go, but God, wait a second. Esau is the older brother. He should get the blessing. What, do you hate him? But see, do you remember when Jesus talks to people and he says, you cannot be my disciple if you do not hate your father and mother and brother and sister. You cannot be my disciple. Well, the Torah had already taught that we're supposed to honor our mother and father. Jesus couldn't teach something opposite of that. He wasn't telling people to hate their mother and father. He was saying, I want your love for God to be so supreme that any other decision you make, it might not seem like you even love your mother and father. And God was saying, I chose Jacob, and people are going to think I loved him and hated Esau, but that is not the case. It is a comparison. It's not about emotion. Here's the stunning twist. God chooses Jacob instead of Esau. But let me ask you this question. When you look at the lives of Jacob and Esau, which brother actually reminds us more of Jesus? Could it be the brother who was wronged and yet offered forgiveness? Could it be the brother who was betrayed, yet he was the one seeking reconciliation? Could it be the brother who welcomed the offender with open arms and tears? Could it be the brother who said, I have a home, I have land, and I have people, and I want to give it all to you, even though you stole my blessing? In this story, it almost seems like Esau is the one who reminds us more of Jesus, and yet he's not the one who was chosen to carry on the covenant. It was Jacob, the deceiver, the runner, the fearful one. He's the one that was chosen, he and his family, to eventually bring the Christ. And I'm like, isn't this just another reflection of the gospel? The one who did everything right ended up asking, my God, why have you forsaken me? And the ones who really screwed up our lives and we lied and deceived our way through and we hid our way and we tried to steal everything, to us it said, and as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God. Right? So here's what the story of Jacob and Esau should continue to teach us: that God's unexpected blessings come in his unexpected ways. He chooses the unlikely, he uses the undeserving, and he tells his story through people that no one else would choose, which reminds us, as we enter the Christmas season, we remember the most unexpected move of all. God actually became flesh to pursue, to reunite, and to actually give us his blessing. So what do you do with a story like this, right? We know we have a father who wants to bless his sons, just like Isaac wanted to bless his. We know we have a brother who runs toward us with mercy, just like Esau ran toward Jacob. We know that Jesus is the fulfillment of both. He's the one who blesses. He's the one who embraces. So what do we do? And here's just in conclusion. We wrestle with the truth. And we be honest with God. Right? Jacob spent years hiding who he was. But everything finally changed when he told God the truth. So let me ask you, what is the Spirit pressing into your heart today to just say, it's about time you told the truth? It's about time to just be honest. Because we all know that sin. We all know what you're hiding. We all know that struggle. We know it. Stop hiding it. And let's just be honest. I was listening last night as I was shoveling our driveway. I was listening last night to a man talking about prayer, and this is what he said. We so often come to God and we bring our sin of confession as something that we did in the past rather than the person that we actually are. And I was like, that is so true. God, forgive me for saying that or doing that as if I'm okay now. Forgive me for that instead of saying, God, what I did, that's who I am, and I need you to change me. I need you to change my heart because that's who I really am. It's not something I did, it's someone I am. Have you ever been honest with God about that? Secondly, we need to see the greater story and get to celebrate the author, right? I mean, we've been talking about the greater story all year long. Like this drama is kind of cool and Esau's forgiveness is beautiful, but behind it all is the author. He's the one writing it. He chose Jacob before he was born. He embraced Jacob through Esau and he surprises all of us with mercy day after day. And ultimately he writes himself into our story through a baby in a manger. Come on. All that should do is lead us to say, wow, what a cool God we have. So can I encourage you? Slow down some time and just sit back and open the story, not just your story, open the story all the way up and just sit in it of what God did from the garden all the way to what he's going to do in the garden. And you get to be a part of that. And then last, open the next chapter and get ready to walk differently. Jacob walked with a limp for the rest of his life. And if we truly meet God, we will walk differently. He's going to give us a new name, a new identity, a new walk. Hey, here's the thing. Will you just let him start writing freely in your book, in your chapter? Open to the Spirit. Because the God who blessed Jacob unexpectedly is the God who blesses us unexpectedly. And he's still writing the stories of mercy today. Man, what a cool story. It's a kid's story, but it should change adults too. Would you pray with me?